Hi, this is Rob Duroy with the Metalogic StoragePoint team. Just going to do a quick kind of presentation here, a quick demo to talk about our new Endpoints Architecture in our 3.0 product. Just a quick step back to version 2. Had the concept of a storage profile. The storage profile has a scope of web app, content database, or site collection. You define a kind of blob store location within that profile, and then it does that operation synchronously. So fairly straightforward, reference architecture. If you look how that changes in 3.0, it changes pretty dramatically. So we still have the concept of a storage profile, still have the web app, content database, and site collection scopes, but we introduced this thing called an endpoint manager. And what the endpoint manager allows you to do is define as many different blob store locations per storage profile as you want. Those can be filtered by size, by file type, so list, content type. Those operations can be done synchronously or asynchronously. So it allows you to really look at the content within the scope of one of these storage profiles and carve it up on a lot of different things. You might want to put everything from a web app into a single blob store, but maybe there's this one library that has some mission critical content into it, and you want to put that to some, compliant storage platform, or maybe it's participating in a lot of workflow, so I want to put it on a very performant a tier of storage. So it just gives you a lot of flexibility from a SharePoint admin and a storage architect, perspective, and you'll see what what that looks like. Um, so one example or one usage scenario for that you get out of the endpoints architecture is I can have a very simple setup where I want all content that's greater than 500K to go to a NAS on premise, and then everything that's less than 500K to go up to some cloud endpoint. And I want to do that, asynchronously. So I'm going to keep the small stuff, or I'm going to keep the big stuff local, and I'm going to push the small stuff up to a less performant tier. Very simple, use case scenario, but one that it's not hard to see where that one could be widely used. We added this intelligent endpoint management capability into this release as well. So we actively monitor the configured endpoints. So we look at free space, we look at error conditions, and you can set up notification and offline rules for those different conditions. So this is a scenario where as a storage architect, I expose my subsystem via CIFS or an NFS share. We reference that from an EBS or RBS provider. What happens when I fill that up? Well, what you normally would have to do is take that offline, add additional storage, and then potentially have to reconfigure it and even reorganize the content and then bring that back online. So there's some downtime associated with that. What this allows you to do is I can just set up an endpoint that fills up to, let's say, 10% of free space. The StoragePoint can automatically take that offline, and then it'll start right into the next one, fill that up to 10%, take it offline, and keep going. So a storage architect could just add some additional storage, and then create a new endpoint mapping on the storage profile to point to that without any downtime, from a end user perspective at all. We added some advanced filtering capabilities, so you can filter by size. That was in the 2X product. We had some rudimentary file type filtering in 2X. Well, now you can filter by any file type, and then additionally, you can go by scope. So I can go all the way down to a content type, a list, a library. So you can really slice and dice this thing at a much more granular level than you could in our 2X offering. Another advantage of the endpoint architecture was our ability to promote the folder and name. So if you looked at our 2X product, if you looked at the other kind of blob offloading products out there, you get kind of some arbitrary folder structure, and then you get a GUID for a file name, and then whatever the extension is. With this turned on, if you do the operation asynchronously and you check the two options here in the configuration, you can actually have the same structure and file name usage in the blob stores that you have in your SharePoint lists and libraries. So with that, I'm just going to flip over and do a very quick demo here. So here's StoragePoint. We're showing it in 2010, but these features and functions are available in both versions. I've got a RBS profile defined here. I've got 3 different endpoints defined. One is a file system, just using our generic file system adapter. It has a file type filter, so if it's a PDF, let me just open that up. If it's a PDF or a PowerPoint document, it's going to use that endpoint. I've got another endpoint defined where it's going to put content there if it's less than 500K. And then we've got kind of this catch-all. So if it doesn't go to the first blob store or the second blob store, it'll end up in the third one. If I flip over to this site, I'm going to grab 3 documents. I'm going to grab a PDF. I'm going to grab a small file. So here's a PDF. I've got a small TIFF here, 145. You can see it's 80 kilobytes. And then I'm going to go grab this big TIFF up here, 1.TIFF, which is 683. So that should go to the third endpoint. I'm going to go ahead and upload all 3 of those. All 3 files are in SharePoint now. We're doing this asynchronously, so there's a little bit of a delay there before the blobs actually get uploaded. So if I do the PDF here, this should go to that first active blob store, and you can see that it did. It's sitting in the active blob store. You could see it promoted the folder name and the file name. So I put file version. We still put a GUID in there to for name collision purposes. So if I go to that blob store, there's the folder, and there's the actual file, and it's a PDF, so I can open it from here if I wanted to, or I could open it from within SharePoint. 145 was the small TIFF, so that should be sitting up in the Azure cloud, and you can see it is. Archive blob store, Azure, shared documents folder, and there's the file name again. And then this third one was a large TIFF greater than 500K, and that ended up in the RBS store file system, and there's the name of the file, so I can go look at that as well. Let me drill down into that here for a second. Oops. There's the folder, and there's the file. If I click on that, it opens it from the file system. I can also go back here and open it from the UI. So you can see, very straightforward. I had 3 different documents of different types and different sizes, and StoragePoint was able to, put those in the right, endpoint location.